right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today's professional development webinar. We're really glad that you could join us. Today's topic is alternative JD careers. We have a great set of panelists to join us and talk about their careers, how their JDs have helped them in their careers, and what other experience and guidance they can add to this conversation. So I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to let each of them kind of introduce themselves. We have some questions I have some questions prepared for them, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So if you have a question, just go ahead and type it in the message box, and I'll go ahead and read it off. The one thing I would suggest is, if it might make it easy since it's a panel discussion, to put it on speaker view as opposed to Brady Bunch style. But that's up to you, whatever your preference is. So anyway, again, thank you very much for coming. So our panelists today are Jen Remare, Faiza Mokhtar, Heather Sitt, and Kaitlin Geballe. And I'm gonna start with Jen and have her introduce herself and just give us a little bit about your background and what you do and how and that sort of thing.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Michelle said, I'm Jen Remare, currently serving as District 18 Justice for Phi Alpha Delta. That's Eastern Mass, Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. I joined Phi Alpha Delta my 1L year at Suffolk Law School in Boston in November of 2005, so coming up on 15 years. I served as Vice Justice my second year and third year, and was appointed as DJ after I graduated in 2008. I also serve as Clerk of the Boston Alumni Chapter. For my real life job, I work at the Debt Exchange. It's a loan sale advisor based in Boston, Mass. We have a few satellite offices, mainly for sales in other parts of the country. I can go a little into what I do. I don't know exactly how they'll fit into questions, Michelle, but there are three main prongs of the company. It's a loan sale advisor, which is where I work primarily. They do valuations and analytics, and then technology solutions. The latter two, the third I have really basically nothing to do with. The second, to an extent, with the documentation and data that I deal with the loan sale side. But what our company does is we trade debt on the secondary market. So our clients are the sellers. So they're banks and other financial institutions, as well as FDIC and HUD. So we sell loans for them in a sealed bid process on an online platform.
Great, thank you, Jen. Faiza, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Faizal Mokhtar. I am currently in Phi Alpha Delta. I'm a District 30 Justice. And then before that, I was the past ADJ for District 3. So 30 covers Orange County and San Diego, and 3 covers Los Angeles. In terms of what I do for my day job, I am, the formal title I have is called a clearance manager at Tennis Channel. And basically clearance is fancy in entertainment for rights, licensing, permissions, really managing third-party content. So I handle all the third-party content for our company. So anytime somebody wants to use something at Tennis Channel, whether it's a song, whether it's a video, whether it's a photo, that is not ours. I arrange the license, I negotiate the license or a release to make sure that we're allowed to use it. So I make sure that we can use whatever we are using that is not our content. And I've been there since October of 2018. So I just hit my 2-year anniversary there.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Heather, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I'm Heather Sitt. I've been with Phi Alpha Delta since 2012. I actually started off as one of Jen Remare's kids in District 18 at New England Law Boston, which is the McLean chapter. I was an officer there, Vice Justice and Justice, and then I moved out to Seattle, where I became the Vice Justice of the Seattle Alumni Chapter, and then came down to LA some years later, and was the District 3 Justice and District 30 Liaison for about a year and a half. And that's my P.A.D involvement. I've also been to conventions, served on committees there, been on a couple of the IUB committees, particularly around diversity and inclusion previously, and P.A.D core values, that type of thing. My day job right now is the manager of the Product and Portfolio Management Office, which is a new office created 2 months ago, actually. It had previously been the Program Management Office at UTA, and it's housed in information technology. What that effectively ends up meaning is that I manage our product portfolio of custom and customized software development. So anything where we are taking an off-the-shelf software product or building it ourselves is in my team. The other job I have, which is my like side gig second day job, is as COO for a software development company that focuses on productivity and productivity management. And so how to optimize that for yourself. And for that company, which is Raleigh Co., and we're about to spin up a new one for investment, is Roller. That's the product name also. And for them, I've been with them since January of 2018 and oversaw the corporate relocation from Washington State to California, and will be overseeing our spin up of NewCo, which will be based like Delaware C Corp standard.
Great, thank you. Kaitlin, can you introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background?
Of course I can. So I'm Kaitlin Geballe. I joined Phi Alpha Delta in 2006, and I'm feeling a little bit old now, realizing that. When I was at the University of Wisconsin Law School, which is Ryan chapter, I had a warm welcome because BJ was my DJ. So, you know, lots of P.A.D love. I think Ryan chapter has since kind of faded, presumably because I was amazing and have since left. So I moved to the Bay Area where I met Michelle and several other great P.A.D people, was part of that district, was briefly DJ there until I moved to Seattle, where I'm involved with the alumni activities. We are struggling a little bit to figure out exactly what we want to do with COVID, but still trying to stay involved. And I think these webinars are really great. And it's really been interesting to, between this and virtual convention, see how we've bridged kind of the whole country together, which is amazing. So for my day job, I work at Deloitte Tax. I'm a senior manager in our international tax group, and my practice focuses on U.S. multinationals with outbound operations, so U.S. companies that are, you know, have foreign subsidiaries doing things overseas, mostly C Corps, a few partnerships, a few real estate investment trusts. I started in our San Jose office in 2010, moved to Seattle in 2014, and work with a group that's about 50-50 accountants and attorneys.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to start with questions. The first one is, how did you find your job? Is it something you looked for? Is it something you fell into? Just a little bit of how you found this JD alternative job. Anyone?
Anybody? Okay.
I'll go ahead first if we want. So I networked into both jobs. I knew the person who hired me socially first, and did some nonprofit work or other projects with them. And based on that, when they were hiring, they went, "Hey, you're really good at coordinating things. Can we have you coordinate for pay with us?" And I went, "Yeah, probably. Let's talk about how much." And that's how I landed both jobs.
Nice. Kaitlin, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I also networked into my job. I finished law school in December of 2008, which for those of you old enough to recall was like right after Lehman Brothers crashed. Everyone that I had gone through on campus interviewing with said they just weren't filling positions. I think something like 15 or 20% of my graduating class, which was really the class of 2009, had jobs. So I moved to the Bay Area to be a legal assistant 2.0, which meant that I did social media for a law firm. And I started running with a woman whose husband worked at Deloitte, and he worked with a guy at Deloitte whose wife was the recruiter for tax, right? It was a kind of a circular thing. And I had encountered Deloitte while I was in law school, representatives from the firm came in and talked to our tax class, talked to us about what a career in accounting could look like with a JD background. But can't emphasize enough that ultimately connections and networking are a lot of how I got where I am, and how I know a lot of the people on this call and how valuable those are.
Great. Faiza, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I actually re-entered the industry twice. So the first time was when I graduated in college in 2007. I actually just applied for my job cold, and I got into like a entry-level job at E Entertainment. And then I quit in 2009 to go to law school. So in 2012, I re-entered. I couldn't take the bar because I was moving back in the middle of June, excuse me, and I couldn't do a review course and all that stuff. So I immediately switched into the mode, like, I need a job. So when I was looking on my own for quite a while and didn't get anything because people were scared of my law degree, they're like, you're going to leave us. So my mom asked her boss's friend if they were looking for anybody. And he was very hesitant to hire me because I didn't have any production experience. And this was for a PA position. So PA in entertainment means production assistant. It's the lowest level job you can have in this industry, aside from working in the mailroom in terms of like hierarchy. So he took a chance because he's like, his friend, which was my mom's boss, was really egging him and pressuring him to hire me. So he did. And then a 4-week job turned into a 1.5-year job because he was quite impressed with the work I did. And how I ended up getting into clearance. I actually fell into it. So when I was a PA, this job I was in, my first job, I decided to, I was like wrapping stuff up because I thought, I'm about to end, the show's about to end. And I remember asking the post-production supervisor, which handles all the post-production content, what can I do for you? Because I have nothing else left to do. I've done all my work. And he's like, oh, you can watch a clip of our show, like just watch the show. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then I realized, wait, there must be more to this than that. So then I asked him, what do you want me to look for when I'm watching? And so when I was, as a PA, I was collecting appearance releases. So anytime we shot somebody on TV, because we were heavily in the field and on set, we would get them to sign a form basically saying we can use your image. So it's called a release. And he's like, all those people you got releases for and you sorted, make sure they're all on there on the show, like match them all up. And then that's how I pretty much got into clearance, because then shortly after that, my boss wanted me to move on to another show where I did mostly clearance work. So, and then I basically did clearance work. I've done it for like pretty much 8 years. So I pretty much fell into it.
Great, thanks. Okay, Jen, how about you?
Yeah, Caitlin, I remember 2008 vividly. I graduated that May. It was pretty rough for sure. After I took the bar in July, I didn't have anything lined up. I hadn't previously either, but I did have several friends in that boat of having jobs rescinded. And I, put my name in at a few legal staffing firms in Boston. I had even applied to do substitute teaching in my hometown. I'd moved back home. Wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I just knew I needed something because those student loan payments were coming due, and I didn't want to be in a position to have to defer. So one of my friends from law school said, "Hey, Robert Half Legal has been hiring a lot of people lately. We went to school with. You might want to check them out." So I did, and I went on maybe a Thursday. They called me Friday with this job at the debt exchange as a temp in their underwriting department. At the time, they had just gotten a very large contract with the FDIC. For those of you who know anything about that industry, banking, they were closing a lot of banks in the period of 2008-9 through few to several years later. It's definitely slowed down, thankfully, but at that time there were a lot of bank closings, so we were selling a lot of that debt for them on the secondary market. And that was at the end of September. I got that temp job, and then about 3 months later, they hired maybe 10 of us full time. So I've actually been there ever since. I've kind of moved up and doing different things from my early days of just file organization, which is just about as fun as it sounds. But at one point, my boss would joke that he had the largest growing legal law firm in Boston, because we had upwards of 90 to 100 temps at one point. And they were all new lawyers, law grads that couldn't find jobs anywhere else. at that time. So it was kind of a revolving door to an extent, because luckily a lot of people did end up getting jobs as the field opened up a bit in the years that followed. But we had sometimes that were there 3-4 years. So it was kind of serendipitous, but as might come up later, but as I've said in this panel before, it's kind of a cautionary tale of being willing to take a job that's not in the field you wanted. I wanted to practice law when I went to law school. I'm not doing that, but I needed a job, so I took that risk. But at the same time, when you get to a point, it's okay to leave. and 12 years later, I'm still kicking around, and I like it, but it's you do get to a point where it's time for something new, and it's okay to take that step.
Great. I want to follow up with something Faiza said, and that was they were afraid to hire you because you had a JD. I know I've experienced that in some of my career. Have any of the panelists, have you experienced that? Was that something that you had to overcome, that you had a JD and people were afraid, well, you're just taking a job here for the time being, anything like that? And how did you overcome it?
Oh, Michelle, do you want me to answer this as a follow-up? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Anyone.
Okay. So over the years, I didn't really know how to answer that. But then, as you get more interviews and more, because when I was a PA, I was a freelancer. So I was doing basically contract work for a very long time. So ever since I got into it, I wanted to get out because I wanted a staff job. I wanted all the health benefits. I wanted, stable pay, not knowing, when you're freelancer, you don't know when your next job shows up. So, as years gone by, I finally came up with an answer, and they're like, so why are you not a lawyer? I'm like, I haven't taken the bar exam yet. Oh, are you planning to take it? I'm like, I actually don't know. I'll take it this year, next year, tomorrow. I don't know when I'm going to take the job, but for now I'm focused on this job, and this is the job I want to get into. And I think, I kind of learned over the years that applying and interviewing and dealing with recruiters is a game. That's really all it is. And it's just knowing how to answer their questions. And, if they freak out about, oh, you're going to leave, it's more focus on other things where you show that, hey, I'm actually going to stick around for a little bit. So I always try to reroute the conversation to say, don't worry about the bar exam. I haven't even done it yet, even though I took it several times and didn't pass. I'm like, don't worry about it. If I take it and pass, I'll be looking for legal jobs, not attorney adjacent work. So for now, the job I want is the job I'm going for. So, sometimes I had to be pretty blunt with them, and some of them didn't like it, and that's okay. But I think there were quite a few others that appreciated the honesty, and they're like, yeah, that's true. We don't know. And then the company doesn't know if they're going to fold. So it just comes down to having that honest conversation with them.
Great. That's helpful. So the next thing is, how do you think having a JD has helped in your current role or even previous roles?
So okay. I can start with that one if it's no particular order. I don't know what order people are on people's Zoom screens. But Deloitte is an accounting firm, and we used to hire mostly accountants. Now, I think particularly in specialty groups like mine, which is international tax, we do hire about 50% JDs. And I think the reason that we have drifted more towards that even split is that while we need accountants to do the numbers and the debits and credits, we also are doing tax law. And there are 6 fat regulation books that sit on my desk, and you have to be able to read them and understand them. And there's case law that applies, and the accountants, I'm sure there are many accountants who can write, but it is not necessarily their strongest suit. It's not what they go to school to learn. And so while the accountants had to teach me debits and credits because I have never taken an accounting class in my life, and now I run audits, I had to teach a lot of people how to write and how to look up cases, how to read cases, how to understand them. I said shepherdize to an accounting staff once, and she just looked at me like, what, like shepherdize? Are there sheep involved? Like, what's happening? And so, it's this really interesting intersection of accounting and law, and being able to share those different skill sets has been really useful. I mean, I remember vividly my first year as a staff reading the US-Irish Treaty for the Prevention of Double Taxation and telling a partner what it said and her telling me I was wrong and taking it up to our national office and the partners there and the Irish partners, and then coming back to me later, only after she'd had like 3 cocktails, to apologize and say, oh yeah, I guess you know how to read these things and understand them and internalize them and interpret them. And so that's something that if I had just gotten an accounting degree, I wouldn't have been able to do, right?
Great. Heather, what about you?
So it's been super useful for me. When I was in law school, what I actually focused on was corporate tax. I was super into it, and that was what I was looking at doing after law school. And so now in various roles, both jobs really, I do a lot of interfacing with lawyers, with accountants, with other professional services. And so understanding what they're talking about, just I went to school, I'm familiar with a lot of the concepts that we're discussing, and then being on the execution side of it. So now I'm in a business where those things have an impact on what we're doing. And knowing when we're in a situation where I need to go call an accountant, call an attorney, what type of attorney, how to talk to them. Being able to vet attorneys and accountants has been really useful. So that way we're not working with someone that we don't want to, who doesn't know what they're talking about, who can't talk to like a founder or a CEO in a way that the concepts make sense to them. Because not every attorney can do that, but the ones that we want to work with do. If you like, my personal sort of belief is if you can't explain it to someone, then you probably don't know it that well. And that's like, I want, like Caitlin's saying, someone who has the ability to write and communicate. And so that's really where it comes into play, is the vetting and the deeper understanding. So we can have some jargon-filled conversation, but then bring it back down so everyone else in the room understands.
Great. What about you, Jen?
No, it definitely has. And it's certainly not a requirement for the job I have as deal manager, but these loan files, they're all, they're legal documents. And when you're going through them and we have to do asset write-ups on the loans and what's happening with them and the collateral. And wanting to do real estate law, there was some crossover. So there were terms that weren't foreign to me. I knew what they meant. I knew how they intertwined with each other. And while I'm not in the legal department, I work with lawyers all the time, or deal with lawyers all the time, whether on the buy side or the sell side. And even though, especially I haven't been there so long, I know what the day-to-day is. I know how closings are supposed to look for a loan sale as opposed to a real estate transaction. Sometimes that is that level of knowing kind of the lawyer's background in the law, and to have this point of how to talk to them. I mean, it sounds silly, but sometimes when I can put out there, oh, well, I'm a lawyer too, when I hear what you're saying, it's sadly, I guess, but somehow, I don't want to say it gives me more credibility, but they kind of will step back and say, oh, okay, and I hope that's not the case with my, coworkers who don't have JDs and aren't lawyers, that, they don't get, pushback on it. But sometimes just to be able to put that out there, and it's kind of in their mind levels the playing field, and they kind of say, oh, okay, no, you know what you're saying, even though it doesn't matter. I don't need one to be able to tell you how I do my job every day. But it can be helpful. I actually recently had a situation like that, and it was helpful. Again, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for us lawyers, but it worked out well, and it does sometimes.
Great, thanks. So my next question is, what experience besides the JD do you think it's important to have, either education or previous background, in order to get and to be able to do a JD alternative job? Heather, do you want to start with that one, or?
Sure. So other experience that was really helpful for me in my roles, I did consulting before going to law school. And so that gave me a really wide breadth of experience in a couple different industries working on projects. And so having that, I think skill-wise, time management, law school did a really good job of teaching me that. I don't know anyone who wouldn't say that is true. because that and then the pattern matching has been really useful. Just being able to take best practices from one area, examine what could work in a new situation, test that out, try it, figure out if it's failing really quickly, and then moving on to the next thing if that didn't work out, or adopting it as another area in which a pattern worked and retaining that knowledge has been great. I think other experiences that are related that have been useful are, client services. Everyone has a client, has a customer, if you frame it correctly. And so learning to be oriented towards that and be sort of service minded is really useful. People like feeling like they're cared about, and that really helps get your foot in the door or people to respond more positively when you're working with them.
Great, thank you. Faiza, what about you?
I guess the other experience that has helped in my line of work has actually been working in production and working in the trenches. I think it's important if you're even, because my ultimate goal is to be a production attorney, so working on a show with the studio or a production company. And I think what I've noticed in a lot of attorneys that, I don't want to say may not be the best, but I feel like would become difficult or don't understand things is they don't understand how production works. They don't understand the workload that it takes. They don't understand the day-to-day job of what a producer does, what a production coordinator does, what a line producer does, because they're only focused on the deal-making aspect and like the legal aspects of the job. So I felt like seeing a production go from start to finish, working in the field as a PA, really helped me better understand the process and better appreciate the process. So if there was an issue that involved me and I had to talk to a producer saying, hey, you can't use this, or hey, what happened? Why didn't we get these releases in the field? I'm able to talk to them in a language that they can understand. Because I feel sometimes I've worked with a lot of attorneys, and I found in my line of work, I'm often the conduit between the attorney and the production crew, because I understand where the attorney's coming from, and I understand where the production crew's coming from. So I always found myself in a lot of these jobs that I was bridging the gap between the two when they couldn't understand one another. So I felt like I was always often like that link. And I always felt like it was because of the experience I had and the appreciation I had for what it took to make a television show, because I predominantly work in television. It was easier to explain concepts to producers when the lawyer couldn't do it or was explaining it in terms that were completely foreign to the producer or like a crew member or a production assistant. So I felt like that really helped me a lot. And I think the other thing that helped me too, my other experience, I don't know, was just having a lot of thick skin. Like when you're working in a kind of like, I don't want to call it a low level position, but a PA was a very low level position. It really teaches you how everything's not personal at all. And it always helped me when I had to approach producers when they were doing something wrong or something that would put us at a high risk for liability. I didn't feel bad or feel nervous or feel unsure that I have to tell them like, hey, this is wrong. You need to correct it. Like, let's talk about why you did it that way and how we can improve it. So I think having thick skin in this business really helped me. And if somebody does something wrong, it's not the end of the world. Somebody always told me it best, like, if something happens, it's not the end of the world. It's just television. People forget 2 hours later what happened. So I felt like those two skills have helped me, including with the skills I have with my JD, researching and just really being able to talk to people in a certain way. It's a lot of relationship building in my line of work. So I felt those things have helped me really excel in my job and actually in many ways feel respected in my position.
Great. What about you, Jen?
No, same. I think that's a good point, Faiza, you made earlier too about being a conduit, kind of between, lawyer speak and people who, don't have that background. And certainly for me, being at my job so long, my job itself, the experience where I am now has grown and melded together. And I've had many different clients. I've had many different buyers. I've had many different situations. And I'll tell you, even though we've seen so many things, every now and again, something new comes up and we all kind of all look at each other and say, gee, have you seen this before? Have you seen this before? But because so many of us have worked there for so long, we pull back on the experiences from this job. And then, maybe I bring in, a legal background and someone else may have even an accounting background or some other financial background, and we figure it out. But before law school, I worked in daycare, and just follow me for a minute. I worked in daycare for a long time. And I'll tell you, people are people, whether they're 5 or 50. And I think it was what Heather said something earlier about talking to people in the way you talk to them to, kind of get them to not necessarily be on your side, but to kind of work with you. Again, I had a recent situation. I was dealing with an attorney he was very demanding. He didn't like the process, even though the process is what it was. And, I found myself having to speak to him kind of in a way. I don't want to say that I would speak to a child. That's not fair. But, you kind of get in that mindset, well, I'm going to use the I statements. I'm going to say, I understand where you're coming from and that type of language. But I'll tell you, negotiating with young children and trying to solve problems, it really does carry throughout your work. I mean, I'm it sound like I'm being funny. I'm really not. I say it often. I'm like, honestly, that job helped me a lot with patience in those types of situations, and being able to, I hear person A, I hear person B. We all want to get here. How do we get here? So I almost feel like I'm a mediator sometimes, which is what childcare and parenting is. So it's kind of interesting how you can really fall back on the basics no matter what you're doing.
And then my final question for all of you, and then if anyone else has questions, you can unmute yourself or you can just write it in the text box and I'll go ahead and read them off. Do you have any suggestions for people who are looking to get into like a JD alternative type position? Kaitlin, you want to go first?
Yeah. So, one of the things so what everyone has said about bridging gaps is true. And one of the things that's been really helpful is that the tax classes I took in law school, we had a partnership with the business school. So MBA students were taking the law tax classes and lawyer students, JD students were taking the MBA tax classes as well. And having that sort of dual view on things, I guess. So I guess the advice would be don't just take sort of the traditional law classes and don't, if you have the option while you're in school to take some other things in an area that interests you. I don't know, Faiza or someone else could speak to, if I wanted to get into your line of work, what maybe could I have taken in school to help me with that, right? For me, any kind of business class, I really wish I had taken an accounting class before I started at an accounting firm. But, my economics background has helped there. So, looking at what you did for undergrad, what does that pair with, if you're looking, there's just so many types of non-traditional JD careers, right? That it just depends on what else your background is. Michelle has 3 degrees, so she can probably do anything, but she's combining all of her things all the time, and so having the business background, understanding the kind of work that you're doing, and then being able to bridge that gap, like everyone has talked about, which is communication skills. So if you're not great at communications, law school should probably help you with that. I'm sure you're taking a legal writing class, or you're practicing oral arguments, doing moot court, something. But being able to communicate is valuable in just about any field, I think.
And like piggybacking off of what Caitlin's saying, it's not just taking classes outside of your legal studies. I would also recommend networking outside of them, because that's a lot of how I've, gotten jobs and also stayed interested in how the law evolves. So it's not just, oh, here's the law, oh, here's this other topic. It's really where they commingle and how they evolve together. So like the law is really impacted right now by technology, and technology is most of my day-to-day, but every now and then some legal things pop up, especially when we're talking about, at a talent agency, security and privacy for clients. There was a big thing right before I joined the agency where CCPA came in to be involved. So our CISO, who was also previously a consultant, had a ton of work to do and like had to do a bunch of recommendations. He spent a lot of time with legal. Once I came in and I was helping finish out projects, it was really useful to have the legal background and be like, no, I understand where you're coming from. Here's how we need to structure some of the things and the way that we should be talking about it with legal. But to go back to the original point of the networking, like at any point in a JD alternative or a JD preferred sort of role, you will be called on to help do that translation and make those connections for people. And so having the familiarity with both sort of sets of terminology is going to be incredibly useful. And staying fresh on it too.
What about you, Faiza?
It's a mix of what Kaitlin and Heather said. A lot of what I've done was a hybrid. So I immersed myself in the industry. I mean, before law school, I was in the entertainment industry. So I just think like, and now with sports, like there is a Slack community for sports creatives, and it's a great way to see how people in the sports world operate, where there's actually a lot of overlap. So I always tell people, join that Slack group. Even if you don't know what to say, just read and just immerse yourself in the businesses that you want to be part of. Networking, I know people get really intimidated by networking. I actually really hate networking. It's uncomfortable. It feels inorganic to me a lot. So use networking in a different way. Like the way I got back into the industry was my mom's boss, and my mom's a nanny. So, and she always works for entertainment lawyer people. So it worked out that way, but really like look into your network. Like you'd be amazed who people know. And it only takes asking, hey, like, I'm looking, do you know anybody that works in this industry? Or, I'm trying to get into this. Like, you don't have to do it cold or go to these networking events and think this is your only solution. Like there are other ways to network, and you'd be amazed who knows who and where you can get in. And then finally, I mean, all the full-time staff jobs I've actually applied cold. So I applied online and got the job. I got very lucky. So, applying too helps, and actually really getting to know recruiters. Like if you want to work in my field, for example, like if you want to work in an entertainment studio or production company, if there is an HR department, studios will have an HR department, not so much the production companies, get to know some recruiter. If you're going to a recruiting event or a networking event and you meet if the only people you meet are recruiters, you're probably going to be in better shape because those are the people who are sourcing through all the applications. So I would say, make friends with recruiters as much as you can too.
What about you, Jen?
Well, I definitely agree with what Faiza, Kaitlin, and Heather said. And, on top of what Faiza said with the dreaded networking, I think, the word networking can have so many negative connotations for people. And, I think it's more of just talking. Change it from networking, just talk to people. I talk to people everywhere I go. I'll sit on a train, I'll strike up a conversation with someone about just, oh, what do you read? I mean, not in an annoying way, but especially if I'm on the train and I see, someone with a law book, I immediately say, oh, you're in law school. Where do you go? Are you in P.A.D? Because obviously, but even when you go to a quote unquote networking event, or if you're at a P.A.D event, just talk to people. And, that's the organic part, is just trying not to have this is maybe not I'd like to get into this. How do I do that? But more of a, oh, like I was watching the show about blah, blah, blah. That looks really cool. Do you know anything about that? Are you interested in that? And you never know what people will remember from a conversation with you, just from shooting the breeze. I'll say it that way, just talking to someone, about any topic, and then they remember you. And if they hear of something, say, oh, I was talking to Faiza and she said she was interested in XYZ. But that's just that. As far as, the JD preferred or alternative, look, I wanted to practice law when I went to law school. A lot of people go and don't. It's not, or whatever reason they go to law school, they don't care about practicing law. Some never take the bar exam because that wasn't their goal. I still get now questions when people hear I'm a lawyer and they say, oh, what firm do you work at? Or, you know, what law do you practice? And it's well, I don't. And it's, oh, why? And then it's like, you feel like you have to have this explanation. And it's okay to go to law school and be a lawyer and not practice law. And I think I still struggle with that sometimes, mainly because that's what I wanted to do. But so it's kind of let go of any, if you have them, of any feelings that, you know, people look at you in a way, and I don't even know what way that is, but in a way that's somehow questioning why you're not practicing law if you're doing a JD preferred or otherwise alternative JD career. Because, you know, I get it a lot. I still get it now. And I kind of, every time I kind of feel like I want to do this, I'm like, I don't know. Well, this happened and then this happened. I'm like, look, I have a good job. I'm good at it. You know, yeah, I'm a lawyer too. And that's okay. So, you know, as far as that kind of emotional aspect of it, especially if you were looking to practice and, you know, things don't go your way for whatever reason, it's okay.
That's a really good point. I like that, Jen. That's a good point. So we have a couple questions. One is from Brother John Parasic. John says, one of my previous bosses switched from being an attorney to being an executive. He later told me that one of his personal challenges was accepting legal advice and learning to not try to out-lawyer his lawyer. Have any of you experienced that? And how do you balance, one, applying your legal knowledge to your job, with two, accepting the advice of the attorneys whose job it is to advise you? Okay, Heather's laughing, so I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Not out lawyering our lawyers or out accounting our accountants, but definitely you can tell when they're surprised to get a question. Like, they aren't anymore, having worked with us for a number of years now. But definitely initially they were surprised that I was asking as specific questions as I was. And once they understood that it wasn't me challenging them, but genuine curiosity of like, how did we get here? Like, why are we going with this path versus that path? And it was really coming from a place of understanding rather than a challenge. Like, I think you're doing this wrong, which was never the case. It was fine. Because that wasn't what I was trying to do. Like, I don't, unlike Jen, I guess, I very easily let go of wanting to be a lawyer. The advice that I got too well from one of my professors was, if you can imagine doing anything but be a lawyer, go do that thing. And that was why I ended up not becoming a lawyer. So that was easy for me. And so I don't have that challenge. But it is really funny to see everyone's reaction of just like, how do you even know about that concept? I think people are surprised when they find out that I went to law school. Just because I'm so far removed from it and don't do anything that looks like legal practice during the day.
Anyone else want to add to an answer for John's question?
Sure.
No. Oh, go ahead.
Do you want to go, Jen?
No, I was just honestly going to just quickly say that I'm lucky in that, again, I've been there so long that, you know, the senior counsel and the general counsel, you know, I've known them for more than a decade. They've known this whole time that I went to law school. And it's not a question of really having to battle with them. It's just, if something comes up, I mean, I defer to them anyway. Of course, it's not my job at the company to do anything legal, but, you know, but it's good. They're good because they'll do a give and take and they'll say, well, how are you reading this? You know, and we can kind of say, well, I'm reading it this way, you know, and they get that I know, I do know what I'm talking, you know, I'm not just saying, oh, I think it says this, you know, I'm coming from a place of, no, it looks like it says this to me, or my favorite thing is to say, oh, well, arguably it could mean this. So, I mean, theirs is the final decision, but I would say that I have a pretty good rapport with our attorneys on staff.
So I currently work now in a legal department. In the past, when I freelanced, I was by myself. I was pretty much my own department. So my boss is an attorney, and I think for myself, I don't ever feel challenged by my boss. I don't think I'm trying to out-lawyer my boss because, one, my boss has worked in entertainment for over 20 years. So, you know, I always, when I got this job at Tennis Channel, I think I really appreciated it because, oh, great, now I can learn more skills and just add to my legal entertainment toolbox. So I never, when my boss was trying to correct me on something or try to tell me how to do something another way, you know, I would tell him like, hey, what about I've seen it being done this way. Like, what do you think of this? So I often always turn things into a question if I wasn't sure or if it was practiced differently. But I always come in with the perspective that I want to learn and I want to learn more, because I think I'm still under the impression that I think the best lawyer in like the entertainment industries are the ones who are the most well-rounded. So I think I still have that goal in mind, like, let me learn as much as I can so whenever I pass the bar, whenever that works out for me, I can be the best attorney I can for whoever I work for, whether it's studio, whether it's an entertainment law firm or a boutique firm or a production company.
Great.
Yeah, I think pretty clearly, John's question is directed towards people who are in a non-legal position at a company, right, as opposed to in client service. But what I see all the time dealing with tax departments and CFOs is whatever your background is, it's the thing that you poke hardest at, right? If you're a CFO who has a tax background, you just rake us over the coals all the time, right? You want to know why, exactly what Heather said, right? Specific questions, why, help me understand. And if it's someone with a different kind of background, they don't hit us that hard. So I think it's a very natural thing whenever you're in one of those kinds of C-suite roles, right, to push back on whatever it is that your background and what you grew up doing. And the thing that always smooths that over and that seems to make for the best relationships is just to come at things with a collaborative mindset, right? I have some clients where I'm working with their tax department and their legal department and their law firm, and we're the accounting firm, and we're all on conference calls together. And so as long as you can say, look, I know that McDermott, Will & Emery has a bunch of really great tax attorneys, but they also respect that we know the accounting treatment for whatever the transaction is that's going on. We might be a little bit better with Microsoft Excel and running some numbers to actually figure out what the answer is. And so there's that collaboration. And as long as you have that mindset, I think you do okay no matter what, which is also kind of what Heather said, right? Like, everyone wants to understand. And you're all on the same page.
Well, and that's one of the things that, like, definitely when we're vetting accounting legal firms is also sort of a sense of humility. Like, we've hired your firm for this expertise. And so everyone remembering like what their area of expertise is, what the value is that we're trying to get from the experience has been really helpful. So like we're about to go into a situation where we're going to need, our accounting firm, our startup like structure firm, as well as the person that we hired for like employment law are going to have to collaborate together with us to get the result that we want, like as the client. And everyone's been super lovely so far, thank goodness. And so it really is just the communication, some humility, but also remembering expertise and not necessarily swim lines, but the collaborative spirit of the effort. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get something done.
That's awesome. So I have one more question from Katie McKenzie. She asks, what advice would you give to law students who aren't sure what kind of job they want out of law school?
Oh, intern all over the place. I had no idea what I wanted going in. I thought I did. I thought I wanted to do IP. And then I went to a bunch of IP networking events and decided that I wasn't super into hanging out with IP attorneys in Boston. And I thought I was going to be there forever. And so I was just like, oh, these guys. And so then I talked to a professor. She thought that given my skill set from undergrad and consulting, that tax would be a very interesting space for me to go. And so I then started looking into different tax networking events, because part of what you have to decide is who do you want to hang out with? Like, who is going to be across the table from you? Who are you going to have to go to all of these other networking events? And I didn't want to, hang out all the time with people I didn't like. And so
I feel like you're going to say something bad about tax, Heather. I don't know.
No, it was lovely. I loved it. The people were not why I left tax at all. It was really my favorite because it was a bunch of people who really loved solving puzzles, who are my people. Like, tax nerds are great nerds to hang out with. I love it. I miss it. This is why I still hang out with you and Taylor all the time.
Talk about tax nerds. What about you, Caitlin? What advice would you give to a law student looking to figuring out what they want to do after law school?
So I think trying everything is good. Taking whatever classes you can take, and then just listen to kind of the buzz, right? So I took a tax class because someone said, hey, Allison Christians is a really great professor. And the way that she taught the class got me really hooked on the subject. And I realized, like Heather said, it's a bunch of problem solving, and it's like fourth grade word math problems on steroids. And it was super exciting. And then I took all the rest of the tax classes, and that was kind of my foot in the door. And everyone that I interview, because I do a ton of interviewing, both undergrad, masters of tax, and at law schools, all say the same thing. They're like, well, I just took this class because it was there, someone said it was good, and I'm interviewing from, Seattle University, University of Washington, Gonzaga, like all different places, right? And everyone says, and then I just had this moment where it was my thing. And so you can't have the moment where it's your thing if you don't go figure it out, right? So take the classes, take the internships, do whatever the thing is until it's your thing.
I like that.
It just takes time.
What about you, Jen?
Yeah, I think more than anything else, be open, and and allow yourself to be open to different things. But I think maybe start with what you already like and know is a starting place. But be open to trying new things. Again, kind of like what Caitlin said with the buzz. And if someone's going to be a great professor, on X subject, look into that subject. What is it? And then you may just think, oh, that may be something I'm interested in. I guess worst case, you take it and you drop it, right? You don't like it. For some weird reason, I loved property. And then that devolved into me taking just a lot of real estate classes and tax classes. And then I decided, I want to do real estate and estate planning. That didn't end up working out. But, and then I thought I worked at a daycare at a hospital, and I was interested in the hospital setting. And even now I think I wouldn't mind working, in a hospital in some capacity, whether it's, in their legal department or some sort of compliance department, or education with my daycare background. And I did go to school briefly to maybe be an elementary ed teacher, which I eventually stopped to go to law school. But, so there are different things based on maybe what you've done in the past that you can fit, whether it's a actual legal position or, some other, whether JD preferred or just a JD alternative position. But do something you like and that you want to be doing. It's just the biggest advice I can give you. It may not be all the time. You may have to sometimes do things to get by that you don't necessarily love, but ultimately look for something that you want to do and you enjoy doing, and that pays the bills.
There's the key. What about you, Faiza? What advice would you give a law student?
So I think I know for me, like I was always interested in entertainment since I was like 15. Like I know when people watch the Emmys or the Oscars, they're like, ooh, what are they wearing? And I'm like, I was like, I want to know how much that person got paid in an episode. So for me, it was always at a young age that I was very interested in it. In terms of, I know, and when it came to college, where they're like, oh, you need to do internships. I didn't do it. I did nothing. I did none of that stuff because I was always like involved in school and doing extracurriculars at school. So in law school, I think, and I didn't do really any internships outside of law school either because, I just, law school, personally was a very rough time for me. Just a lot of things happened and I really couldn't dedicate climbing that ladder. So I used what I had. My school had clinics, so we were required to take a clinic. I took 2. So I took a mediation clinic and I took criminal law trial clinic. Ooh, excuse me. Another thing my school required was something called the law firm program. It was like a simulation of a law firm in a semester course. You only had to take one. I took, I think, 2 or 3 of them. So I just really used what I had and just try to gather more interest. So I did like software licensing because I want to know how to do contract drafting. So it's just picking up skills here and there in law school before I can move on to before I was able to graduate. So I think it's just figuring out what you really want to do and what you want to do in terms of like your course load, aside from like, especially if you don't think you're going to take if you're going to take the bar exam, instead of those bar related course, use those electives to see like, and if you can get into a clinic, try to get into a clinic. I think that gave me the best experience. Like I I also took trial practice, or other schools call it trial advocacy. I took a lot of like, what is that called? Application courses, that went away from theory, because then it helped me figure out where I wanted to go and what type, like, where did I want to work within entertainment? Did I want to do all the litigation, or did I want to do all the transactional work? And I learned I wanted to do all the transactional work. That was much more enjoyable for me, because it was, you're one and done. Like, you're not there until 9:30 at night, or you're not like tolling away at a brief for litigation. So I just found what I had in law school really helped. I mean, I was in some organizations like on campus, but they left a lot to be desired, to be honest, because I think I went to school in Michigan. When you're going back to California, I kind of already had an idea what I wanted to do. So, but if you don't, just use everything. If there's organizations out there, if there's like sports and entertainment society at your school, and you're interested in either one of those fields, join that club. See what, go all the events. They'll probably have speakers. They'll have networking events. Do the clinics if you can get into one, especially if they're popular and there's a process for it. And I think it's just more of grabbing everything you have and using it, and then finding out what you want to do, because you won't know unless you try or start to explore it.
Great.
And I think on top of that, just like really understanding what your interests are, what you're good at, where those overlaps are, and then approaching every, attempt at finding the thing as a learning experience. So like, I have taken jobs that weren't awesome, like a political campaign that I worked on, but I picked up some really cool skills doing it. It's a really neat experience to talk about. I learned a ton doing it. And very specifically, I learned things that I didn't want to do again. So I did not want to have to be up until 3 a.m. preparing talking points for someone else. That wasn't a thing that was going to be interesting for me. So the takeaway was, don't be in any job where sort of a cult of personality is required to survive and like thrive in that. And so just really looking at different experiences and drilling down into them and building more self-awareness is, I think, very critical to success, regardless of whether you want to stay in legal or go out. Just very important life skill to develop.
That's awesome. So I just want to add one thing, is that count on Phi Alpha Delta and our brothers and sisters and members here to answer your questions. Reach out to somebody that's in a field that you might be interested in. A lot of us have it in the directory what our fields are, so you can kind of search, or you can always reach out if you're a student to your district justice, or even alumni to your district justice, or another alum that you know, or a board member, or anybody, and we'll help you find somebody that can answer your questions about a field, or just sit down and talk with you, do a virtual coffee or wine tasting or whatever, and really just kind of feel it out and ask where they're at, and how they got there, and what they would recommend. So with that, I want to thank our panelists, Jen, Faiza, Kaitlin, and Heather, for agreeing to talk today. I really appreciate it. And for all of you who joined us, thank you so much. This will be available on YouTube shortly, so feel free to watch it again or recommend it to your friends. Next month, we're doing a panel on lobbying and what it takes to be a lobbyist and how to break into the field. So future ones will be on starting your own law practice. We're also looking at doing one on e-signature and remote notary. So we've got a lot of great webinars coming up. So again, thank you all very much for joining us. Don't hesitate to reach out to a fellow P.A.D member if you have questions or you just want to chat. I hope you all have a great week and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you all very much.